I'm your humble host, Allison DeFord, and we have with us our founder today. So I'm really excited. Darren Mitchell. It's like the Netflix for manufacturers, only instead of entertainment, it's all about education and best practices. It's everything they never taught you in school. Here's a thing that I'm going to talk about. Here are the points. Here's a playbook. Go.
Not just the leadership, but share that best practice with your staff. So we're doing this in real time, not hearsay of something we heard on the news. You can't be all your HR, inventory management, supply chain, sales, marketing. You can't be all of that at once to all the people who make up your business.
It's creating such a community. I think that's the thing that's exciting to see. And for anybody, if you're not already subscribed, get your booty over to manufacturing-masters.com and do that, because this platform is just continuing to grow and to expand, because with you, there's always something next. Ray Zaganto, welcome to the Manufacturing Masters podcast. Help is out there for you. Yeah. It is at your it's at your fingertips, and all you have to do is reach out and say, "Hey, can you help me?" And guess what? You'll get the help.
The crazy thing, I'm with you. There's a last mile problem, and it impacts a lot of different areas. I'm sure it's true in other industries. I've seen it up close and personal on the workforce side. There isn't a manufacturer that we talk to and we say, "Hey, what's keeping you awake at night?" And it's like workforce, and then workforce. How do I get more? How do I keep the ones I have? How do I train them? So there are so many things, so the manufacturers are panicked about that. The schools are trying as best they can at the high school, community college level, even the four-year universities, to put programs in place. They're trying to listen to manufacturing. What do you need? We'll train to that, to those skills and standards. And then it's getting the manufacturers to come in and take advantage of it. We had somebody at the Maywood event today that is working in a disadvantaged community that is, basically they're an HR firm, but kind of a community building firm. They take these folks and they work with them, and they basically guarantee me, he goes, "I got 10 people right now looking for jobs." And I almost started laughing. I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Because it's like I could make 2 phone calls and get them jobs right now. There are people, manufacturers, just dying for help. How come they don't know this exists?
So glad you're here, Jose. We have so much to talk about today about who needs a strategy when my orders are up 20% year over year.
I think it's the best time to start thinking about your business strategically, because it's possible you're growing 20% because you are a marketing genius and you figured out and cracked the code. But also, when you look at your whole peer set and they're all doing the same, you realize that you're benefiting from the rising tide. Great. Happy, because let's face it, the tide goes down, we all suffer a bit too. So you get it on both sides. But if the tide is rising, then you have to think about how are you taking advantage of that rising tide, right? Because there's 4 strategic things you want to get out of your business, kind of big picture. Well, certainly one is growth, right? Top line revenue. You need revenue to do anything, right? So you need sales, margin. Are you enjoying the margin, the real operating margins you're looking for? EBITDA, right? Or profitability, net profitability. That's so critical to a directly related 4th point, which is valuation. Why somebody growing 20% year over year should be focused on strategy now more than ever.
Damon Pistulka, welcome to the Manufacturing Masters podcast. I'm excited you're here. We're going to talk about the 3 keys to developing a business that someone will buy.
Well, the first one that people usually get stuck on is, and founders are notorious for this, and they're too big a part of the business, the buyer's perspective. That buyer's perspective, if you can put yourself in that position as a seller of a business and go, where I want to sell it at today, not knowing what I know, or knowing what I know about the business is probably a better way to say it. I would turn back the clock 10 years, pay this money, and go forward again and pay it off again. And then the other thing is too, if you're going to sell your business, the one thing you do need to do is before you even start is look at your customer contracts if you have them. Because if your customer contracts say that if you sell your business, they have to approve the transfer of the contract, we run into that all the time. The chances of you selling a business first and foremost is low.
Mhm.
If you prepare, it can be well over 90. But if you don't do anything, you're got about 25% chance because they're going to find one of these things.
Many of you already know her, but Megan, welcome to Manufacturing Masters Podcast. How do we become a company, a manufacturing company that attracts more women? Are there any?
So you really have, yeah. So companies, because our sector has been traditionally male dominated for so many years. There's a certain culture, right, that has come along with that. And sometimes it's a good old boys club culture. So you really have to take a look at your work environment and see if there's anything that might kind of turn off women from applying to your company. So do you have a work environment where, there's going to be a lot of like locker room talk? Because you don't want that to happen. You want to get rid of that. The other thing is, the women that are working at your company, what are you doing to support them and invest in them so that when they do move up the ladder, they're going to become an advocate for your company?
What we can take away from this is the how-to would be culture, incredibly important, retention and focus on that. The third thing you mentioned are job ads. So the language that we're using. And then fourth, being transparent.
Because I think a lot of us try to be perfectionists and we get so anxious about failing because we don't want to disappoint anyone or let anyone down.
Hey, Nelson, I'm so happy that you're with us today on the Manufacturing Masters Podcast. What are some of the things that you see people, you said a lot of times they might focus on the big things. What are some of the little things that may get overlooked that would aid in decluttering and preventing injury?
It's like you mentioned, it's good habits and good practices. And it's about making sure your tools are put away properly so they can be accessed by the next person and the correct tool is used.
Do you feel like, bottom line, that this could be prevented with better training in the beginning? That training is part of the culture. Is that a solution?
Yes. Should be part of the again, back right to hiring, that these are standards. These are practices. They're meant to be upheld. It's about training and coaching, but it's also about discipline.
The millions of people listening to this, I want to make sure that you catch Nelson's video of the ambulance just left. What do we do now? It's brilliant. It's so specific, and it's something that if you don't prepare for that, you go into panic mode. We have with us Kim, and I've decided I've given you a new middle name. You are now forevermore Kim World Class Maintenance Wolf. You have some really amazing insights and lessons learned from these past few years, and I would love it if you want to jump in and let's talk about what you've learned that you can help our listeners learn as well.
So I really encourage manufacturers to really take a look at their prime supplier list, find some secondary suppliers. It takes work to do that. It's not an easy thing. You can't just, go through the yellow pages and find somebody and say, okay, now you're my secondary supplier. It takes work to identify, who you want to work with. How are you going to get supplies from their facility to your facility? The logistics of all of those things, putting together contracts, what are your quality specs, and making sure that those things have been identified very clearly, and then starting to do some trials. And certainly with secondary suppliers, you're going to have a very hard time having anybody sign up to say, oh yeah, I'll be your number two. So you have to make sure that you are giving them some volume at some regular interval in order to keep, their skills up, keep their quality up, and continue to give them something in return for them being, a secondary supplier to you. They need to know they can count on some kind of a volume from you.
Christina, I am grateful that you're here. Christina is going to help you think like a badass.
There aren't enough manufacturers today taking advantage of the digital resources that are out there. So that is something that I'm consistently seeing that I think can be improved. But to your point, if you're not online yet, go and walk through and observe your customer service team trying to answer challenges, because sometimes it could be that they are having to access the ERP for some information. They're going into their PIM system for other information. Then they're going into the engineering system for bills of materials to find other things. So the whole support process is even a little convoluted, which makes it difficult for that customer service person to easily answer the question, or they haven't been trained. I know people will relate to this. Somebody on the service side calls into customer service, and the customer service person has never even seen the piece of equipment. They've never worked it. They've never operated. And that's okay. We all started there, right?
Yeah.
But they're going to be asking very different questions that the person on the other line is hoping that somebody else already knows about them.
So what a treat. It's been a hot minute since you and I got together. I would assume that most people listening to this have either heard of you or seen you on news channels, at trade shows. Like, girl, you are everywhere.
2,500 followers in one day. But we started this Instagram in 2018. So it just tells you how long it takes. And we're not going to see sales from it. And I think that's probably another reason why a lot of people don't want to do it, is because it's time, right? It's time, it's money, it's effort. And you're not going to really see the sales kind of go in line with what you're doing. But the more visible you are, the more annoying you are on social media, people are going to find you, because when one person that you're connected to likes it, it shows up on your feed.
Yep.
And that's how it is, right? It's like a spider web effect. And so you may not see it in the forefront, but in the background, it is generating sales in some like awkward way, but it does.
I want to thank you truly for inspiring me as a woman, as someone else in the manufacturing sphere, and really for showing people, how to lead with heart, with creativity, and just putting yourself out there. So I thank you. Andrew Lavoie, we're so excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for being with us. So today you are going to share with our listeners how to become a preferred employer this year.
So what we like to do is we'll try to ask challenging questions, and then we sit back and listen, and then we get curious about how you answered that. So curiosity is the key in all of this, and then we'll continue to poke and prod until we get to where we're going to go. Running from a meeting and just grabbing a resume that your assistant printed or your admin person printed and going down and just skimming it, and then asking the generic questions that have been rehearsed 1,000 times, that's not going to be a good interview. A lot of companies will be too quick in just throwing a job ad out, when the reality is they might have some great people in their system already. Or, what was your hiring strategy, or what was your promotion strategy, or what was your grooming strategy, or, did you have an opportunity to, what's our bench strength? Bench strength, I talk to all my clients about that, is that bench strength is what drives your business. And it's I say cheap, but it's your best way of filling a position.
So, my gosh, today we have such a treat. I probably say that with every episode, but it's just so true. I'm so excited with Lisa, with what you bring to the table and your energy. And I know that everybody listening is going to get such value. You are helping manufacturers. And one of the main topics that you talk about that totally caught my interest is how to keep your top talent from becoming someone else's.
Well, the thing to keep in mind is that we are not going back to the good old days of 2019.
Right.
Literally everything has changed in this post-pandemic economy where people have a lot more choices. I mean, in manufacturing, it was hard enough to bring people in and hope that you didn't lose them to a competitor. But now you're not losing them to other manufacturers. You're losing them to Amazon and DoorDash and Uber and all of the other choices that they have out there. Well, giving feedback and part of listening to your employees. And it's funny, when I do my programs, a lot of times I'll ask the audience, who does exit interviews? About a third of the room will raise their hand. And I always like to say, isn't that a little late? It's like, hey, why are you leaving? I mean, it's good to set some patterns, but I will tell you, if you're listening to this podcast, stop the car, take out a pen, and write down stay interviews.
I am so stoked to have you today, Greg Michio, because Mr. Windbound, Mr. Sales Digital Twin, I think there's something so special that you bring, not only as an expert on the Manufacturing Masters platform, but a very passionate and committed expert on LinkedIn and, to manufacturing in general. And you and I think, have just such a great synergy and appreciation for each other. We both are all about content and strategy.
Because I'll tell you what, it's just not about new business and generating new leads. It's getting your brand out there to the world, to new recruits,
right?
To politicians, to community leaders. It's about getting out there. And, everybody thinks tech is so sexy. It's because it is. It's out there. The brand is alive. And if we can get the manufacturing industry to come alive online, like we're seeing so many of these great young influencers, and I'm 55, so I can say young influencers, like, Eddie Saunders Jr., Jake Hall, Megan Ziemba, Jacob Sanchez, Ian Stork. I mean, the list goes on about all these young people who are online and super passionate.
Mr. Ken Cho, thank you so much for joining us today on the Manufacturing Masters podcast. What do you do when your CFO says or demands, hey, we need to increase sales by 10%? Go.
Well, there's probably a good reason from a financial standpoint, right? They need 10%. Probably what they want is 10% on the bottom line because they need to invest or they need more profit or they need to reduce debt. Good reasons for that. But my point is, what is their sales strategy? And from a sales perspective, because we work with all our clients against the goal. And when I ask a business owner, okay, what's your sales goal? It's not uncommon for me to get a response, well, I think based on last year's production, we can increase sales by 10%. Well, what's the strategy in that? And so what they really need to do is to think about, okay, what is our opportunity this year and into the future? Where's the growth potential?
I have an incredible guest, Elizabeth Eldridge, and we're going to talk about a really important topic. We're going to talk about mental health. And we're going to talk about how manufacturers can tap into education programs and resources.
It's kind of funny that there is still stigma around things like taking medication because, oh my goodness, if you look at the statistics, I mean, more than half of us are, right? And as I like to say, probably the other half are close to it, maybe should be, right? So, it's like, to use that mental health, physical health comparison again, imagine if I had a broken leg, being embarrassed or feeling ashamed that I have a cast on, right? I mean, everybody knows like that's what you're doing to get well. So yeah, there's sometimes this double-edged sword of stigma where like try and figure this one out. There's stigma associated with struggling with your mental health, but then there's also stigma associated with taking the steps to get better, right? So it puts people in such an impossible position. And you know, it takes a lot to go to a healthcare provider and say, I do not feel like myself, you know? It's big and scary, and it takes a lot of courage to do it.
Oh my gosh. Our guest today is somebody who I swear to you, I feel like I should already know you, Eddie, and we've never met in person. And this is the first time we've ever talked. Talk to me about empathy for a minute and marketing. Like, how did this come up for you as a driver?
Well, a long time ago, which I love. First, let me start with the fact that you've been preaching that, because I don't think it's a new thing by any means. So, and if anything, it's no original concept. I'm just trying to be a reminder to people that other human beings exist, and regardless of what we do in the B2B or B2C realm, both of those equal H to H, which is human to human. And to me, if you really break it down and get to the stinky core of the onion, if you will, peel some layers back, that's been the most true thing of all. And I've read all kinds of these sales books and all of the human understanding and psychology and decision-making books. And a lot of it comes down to a lot of the same concepts, and that we're dealing with humans, and getting the right individual to make a decision is an art, but the science in itself is getting them just to kind of move in that specific direction. So with empathy being a driver. So it's changed a lot of what I do, not only in my professional world, but also in my personal life as well.
Brad, thank you so much for being on the Manufacturing Masters podcast.
Everybody I worked with on this effort in this team is very valuable. But what I've found, like with the schools, they don't know what they don't know. And if industry isn't providing them the right inputs or the proper requests, then you're not going to get a product that you need. And so we focused on working with schools to arrive at a relevant curriculum for kids interested in manufacturing, things they could teach in class. And then we agreed upon those things that could be on-the-job learning situations. And we finished our pilot program here last couple of months, and we just announced the launching of this program statewide.
So today we're going to talk about a topic that may feel a little taboo for some of you. And I'm pretty positive that most of you have experienced this. I know I have. I'm pretty sure Darren has. I know you'll be shocked, but it's imposter syndrome.
I never had a job description. The staff had job descriptions. Some of my senior leaders had job descriptions. I never even had a job description to go by to go, hey, how did I do this year? And I think if you were to ask anybody out there listening right now who's in a senior leadership role, they probably don't even have job descriptions. They're making job descriptions for the people around them to say, here's what you're doing well, here's what you're not doing well. But when you're in that senior position, you got no one behind you going, you're a little out of your lane on this one. And who do you turn to? Like, that's the other frustrating part in the imposter syndrome, is who do you turn to? Because you surround yourself with a lawyer who gives you legal advice. You have some sort of financial advisor that tells you what you did 30 days after you did it. But in the moment, who do you turn to and say, where am I? Am I on track? How do I compare to other people? And it can be a very frustrating, lonely moment. And it usually, like a pimple, it usually pops itself when you're in that stressful moment going, I don't know if I should be the person who's doing this, because there's a lot at stake right now.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, Allison. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for spending some time with us. I
Hey,
am so excited. I've got a quick question for you. People are going to be a little surprised to know, how did you go from naval architecture and marine engineering to what you're doing today as a value creator and an interim COO?
so there's a story attached to that, as you might imagine. So I was trained as a naval architect and marine engineer.
Okay.
When I was 22, I was hired by Amoco Corporation to manage ship construction in Spain. And one of the reasons that was, let's say, even possible is I went to a very small college only for naval architecture and marine engineering. You and I would be a class reunion. I graduated in a class of 19.
Wow.
And the people who called me were a couple prior graduates of the college who had had all of the same courses and professors that I had. So very high degree of trust that enables that.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks later, I'm on a plane to Spain. My instruction set is figure out what you're supposed to do and do that.
Well, folks, I have an old friend with me today. Well, and I think the important thing that really drew people in, I think is the same thing that will draw them into this episode, is you went from intern to CEO of a company, which I feel like is rare, but it may happen more than we know. And I want this particular episode to be motivating and inspiring to not just the leaders and the trailblazers that tune into this, but the young people who are like, I'm an intern. Wait a minute, this guy's now the CEO? Well, how long did it take? What do I have to do? I didn't even think this was possible. So I know this is going to appeal to a wide range of people.
We've always felt that it's important to keep challenging and keep evolving, yourself as you're going through. I think if you are, stagnant in a certain term of not just, who you are and evaluating who you are as a company, as a team, but just even your processes and your products and your services and how you're doing things and how you're looking at it and the markets that you're in. I mean, if that isn't continuously being evaluated and challenged, I can't foresee that would be a road that we'd ever be wanting to go down, that you could ever, it'd be hard to pull out of that if you started going down those roads. I know our business and our industry isn't strong enough to maintain that kind of, security and just maintaining the way that it is. We got to keep pushing in some instances, pushing the envelope with new products and services, but also the way we look at things, the people that we're bringing in, the skill sets that we're bringing in. It's got to be continuously asked, why, even though our gut instinct is just because that's the way we've always done it. It's working well.
This guy, you're going to love this episode, because today we have with us I like to think of him like, remember Mr. Movie Phone? Like, is he still a thing? Right? I think this guy is Mr. Video for manufacturers. So Jeff Long, welcome to the podcast.
So video value bombs, right? Near and dear to my heart. And it started with looking back at my career and what's been effective, what opportunities there are, and looking at manufacturers. And, I just found that a lot of them are like our friend Kurt Anderson says, are the best kept secret, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah. And so, and then the other side of that is, Allison, I quote you all the time, and I always give you credit. Most companies have too much we on their website, in their marketing, right? It's all talking about, we do this, we do that.
Yes.
So, got my wheels spinning. I kind of have this engineering entrepreneurial mind. So I'm like, how can I, what could I create that would help manufacturers as they're trying to sell more effectively? And so, again, most companies used to think we need to create a company promo video and that's it. And while that's a great tool to have in the tool belt, It's not the only one. And so as you and I know, content marketing is becoming key. And I say content marketing is key, but video is king.
Hey, Troy, I know you are excited to talk to everybody listening today about continuous improvement. So welcome to the podcast. We're really excited to have you.
Anytime I bring customers in, because you know what? I don't see the product before it goes out the door, but I have to manage that customer relationship. So I trust the fact that our frontline workers are putting the best quality product out the door all the time. And when I take customers down through the plant and we do a tour and they say, what about this? I tell them, like we had a retailer that came in and said, this is fantastic chicken. You should be really proud. And I told them, I want you to go tell the people that do the work. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm not doing it. But if you go over as the head buyer for a national brand retailer and tell those folks you're very happy with the quality and the work they're doing, that's going to continue to give you a good product out your door. And that's what he did. And they were just so excited about that. And they came to me later, Troy, that buyer came over and complimented me on all the work we're doing. I said, well, you should be proud of that.
That's
because
so
at the end of
cool.
the day, those are the people that matter. And it's our job as business leaders to connect those dots and let them know why they're doing things. To your point, I could go downstairs and say, I want you to measure downtime, miscuts, and throughput, OEEs, thanks, and leave. What does that? That's like a tornado. They don't understand why we're doing it.
Yeah.
They don't understand how it connects to the business. But if I can go down and say, hey, any thoughts on how we can make this line more efficient? What might you do? How might we keep it running?
So I feel like these two should really be leading this episode. And I'm not worthy. Damon and Kurt, thank you so much for showing up with me.
You know, you look at where we live and it's limiting where we live. But what you can do with LinkedIn is so cool because Kurt lives in New York. I live in Seattle. We would have never met walking down the street somewhere. We would have never met at a trade show. We would have never met, you just keep going to where we went. What we did meet is I saw a post from this crazy dude and I was like, that dude is probably my kind of crazy. and it was. And then, it's just blossomed from there. But take that kind of thing and multiply it by a whole bunch. And that's what LinkedIn is.
If I don't have you don't put out this hysterical post that I think was the funniest thing I've ever seen, I don't resonate and connect with you. And now we build a friendship relationship, we build trust, and now we have that no light trust that our friend Greg Mishu always uses, right? Yep. And now you have a wonderful project that I helped you with a proposal, we landed a deal, worked on it together, and we built friendships with that client that will go on forever. And it was just such a win. Okay, number one. Number two, they were struggling with their content. And how many people are whispering and just not having the guts and courage just to raise their hand or put themselves out there when they have so much to offer? Damon, you see this on a regular, consistent basis, and you love sharing how you were that guy. You weren't sharing any content, but you've gone through, it's not a revolution, you've gone through a LinkedIn evolution.
You can, as a manufacturer, you can write a good post. If you're an individual, your business page won't get as much traction, but as an individual, you can write posts and mix in something about your business, something about life, something about, you can get hundreds of thousands of views on your content. You can't pay to get that on a Facebook without spending tens of thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
It's a gold mine, and you're reaching right into the pocket. And that's not a good way to say it, right into the minds of the people that you want to be talking with.
This is my client, and he's also become a good friend, Gary. I'm so excited that you're here today.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for
You have been one of the most delightful manufacturing clients I've ever worked with. And one of the reasons being is that you just put 100% trust.
Ultimately, we came up with, I think, a really good balance where it looks good. You know, the logo has some circuits in it for our circuit board assemblies, and but it's still kind of a fun name that, you know, I don't think many of our competitors have a name similar, which is cool. I mean, I'll just say, as the leader, there's always some degree of fear that you don't know what the heck you're doing, and you're going to drive the company into the ditch at any at any point. And so, I mean, yeah, when you take a 50-year-old company and change the name all of a sudden, yeah, there's some risk there. And so for sure, yeah, you know, like you get partway through the process and you're like, are we doing the right thing? But yeah, and I guess time will tell. Like, our initial response, you know, from customers and suppliers and just friends I mean, it's been overwhelmingly positive. Like, people driving by and seeing our new signage, I hear it around the town.
Whoa. Today we have the man, the myth, the millennial, Jake Hall. Thanks for being here, buddy.
I started to talk about the industry. I started talking about, hey, how are we solving problems? How are we leveraging new technology? How are we getting the next generation of millennials at the time in the industry? And so the Manufacturing Millennial name came about when I was attending a trade show conference, and you know, they were talking about the future of the industry. And I looked across the room, you know, another 450 professionals, and I was the only millennial in the room. And everyone else was like 40 to 45 years old or older. And I'm like, well, geez, I need to be an outspoken advocate to bring new generations on board the manufacturing, because clearly seen at this event, no new generation is attending. You know, so my content and my reach grew online by advocating robotics and automation and new technologies, but then how those tools and solutions can be used to attract the next generation, how it can be used to not only change the equipment and the way we're doing business, but also change the culture in which the company is run. And so I'm a firm believer and I guess you could say advocate on how technology is a means of attracting the next generation into our industry, but also how do we change the culture of our industry to bring these next generations on board.
Today is a super special episode of the Manufacturing Masters podcast. I have with me two of my dearest friends in the entire world, Beth and Christina, both agency owners like myself, and we have a very unique story to share with you. We started working with the same business coach back in like 2009, I think, and did some masterminds with him, and we just had this amazing chemistry, and we're getting so much out of it. And correct me, ladies, if I'm not retelling this right, but people over the years, we decided to keep going, right, on our own. And we meet every week for over a decade. And we talk about personal, business, and we have a structure, and we'll get into that more in a minute. But the point is I feel like it's been life-changing.
Well, I know, I mean, for me, it's a full wheel check-in, you know, and it really helps me, one, be present to what just freaking happened last week and to life as a whole. It helps me kind of take a time out and just like, wow, okay, so those are those wins. That's why I'm feeling really high this week. And let's celebrate that. Those are those micro movements of progress. And then there's the losses, that some of them are, you know, painful. And you're like, no wonder I was feeling a little down last week or down through this, because these are some serious losses that I need to face. And so how am I going to face these? So it gives me a time to kind of reflect on that. What are my fixes for this? Because I don't want to keep creating the same mistakes. And then the ahas, for me, those insights allow me to grow. Obviously, we grow from those, but it also allows me to dream.
in the moment, if something is happening and it just feels awful and overwhelming and like a big failure, if you look at, like, you might think you just had like the most horrible week, and then you write down these wins, and I would say 9 times out of 10, our wins are much greater than our losses. So, but that loss might feel so huge, but when you write down all the wins, and like Allison said, it could be the tiniest thing. It could be, you know, I finally planted that tomato in my garden, or whatever. It could be the smallest thing, but just celebrating anything that's positive, I think, helps you move forward.
This, my friends, is going to be a heavy duty episode. So strap in. Jamie, welcome to the podcast. I think if people will adopt your approach, your process, they will find that it's so much easier to be authentic and to follow, you know, a real process and create real conversations.
When you think about the way that a lot of people approach this outbound thing online, they do it all wrong. And because they do it all wrong, they need to have huge volumes of people. Because if your you know, success rate is under 0.5%, you got to talk to, you know, you got to spam a lot of people before you get one to say yes.
Right.
This approach completely changes that paradigm to a completely different approach. It's high intent, high value, low volume, right? Because it's about connecting with people on a real level, treating them, surprise, surprise, like human beings, following the social norms that you would follow if we met at a trade show or at a conference or even at a party.
Right.
You know, not forgetting that there's a human being on the other side and treating them as such. And so because you take that approach, you don't want to talk to hundreds of people. In fact, you can't talk to hundreds or thousands of people. You want to focus on like 20 people a month.
Well, kids, we have a real treat today. We have the queen of marketing metal with us. Emily, thank you so much for joining me. And one of your videos in particular, you talk about this and you say the job shop or the manufacturer who is trying to be everything to everyone, right? They're afraid to niche down.
So there's a lot of things. I think one thing that you maybe didn't mention was just the level of efficiency when it comes to your marketing too. Like how you end up wasting money when you don't have a clear focus of who you're actually targeting. Maybe we should say niching is don't be everything to everyone. It's getting really specific, finding that niche in your industry, that, you know, that tiny little corner of the world that you can serve best. And there are a lot of different ways that you can niche. It's not necessarily by industry or by type of product that you're making. You can also niche in, like, you know, the values that are most important to you and the type of customer that you're looking for, right?
And you don't have to be or feel overwhelmed. Right. Like, oh my God, what if we don't spend $250,000 this year and be everywhere? Is it going to be a complete flop? And my answer is no.
No.